I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and this is this week's issue of the Libertarian Angle. Great to be back with y'all. I'm joined, as I always am, by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, who teaches economics at the Citadel. Richard, welcome back to the Libertarian Angle.
It's great to be back here on the Libertarian Angle with you and, of course, our viewers and listeners who make this worthwhile and important and to be done.
Absolutely. I thought we'd discuss well, for lack of a better term, the debate Follies last night. It was the big political item of the season, the big debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And Richard, as I was watching this debate, I watched most of it until I fell asleep. It was a little bit boring. But, as I'm watching the two of them, all I'm thinking is, this country's in such deep trouble. It is absolutely in deep trouble. And I think a part of it is that these two candidates are operating within this welfare warfare state paradigm. Their whole mindset is, how are we going to make the welfare warfare state work? And the debate moderators are operating out of the same status box. So there's this sense that, how can we make this thing finally work? Which one of you is going to be the better president? Like they start out with bringing jobs to America, and that hey, things are picking up. You got a sense that the moderators were a little bit pro-Clinton, which is not surprising. The whole mainstream press is pro-Clinton, but the jobs are increasing in America, that unemployment's down, and that things are getting back on track. And after the big 2008 recession. And it's such nonsense. At least Trump had a point that this is a new bubble that's being formed, and we've seen the bubbles over decade after decade after decade of this artificial prosperity, this boom and bust that comes with this welfare warfare state. It's in large part driven by Federal Reserve policy, and Trump says it's politics. The Federal Reserve is trying to get Clinton elected along with the rest of the Washington establishment. They're keeping interest rates artificially low. So you have this fake sense of prosperity that really is just developing the new bubble that's going to be coming along and bursting again in some gigantic crisis. So, of course, Hillary's trying to run out the clock and try to get elected before the crash comes, where then she's in charge. But overall, it's this sense of, which one of these candidates is the better manager of the welfare warfare state? And neither of them realize, and the moderators don't realize, that America's woes are rooted in this paradigm itself. So this notion that we can get a better person in public office to run the welfare state, run the warfare state, is absolutely nonsense. That this country's headed into some real bad trouble here. I think all the chickens are coming home to roost, and it's just a matter of time when this crash comes. Trump pointed out that you've got this $20 trillion of debt and growing by the minute, and you've got Hillary over here just promising all these new freebies of free tuition and free housing and free this and free that. You'd almost feel like you're in Latin America, where they pass out candy to voters in the hopes of getting their votes. I didn't see anything positive come out of this from a libertarian standpoint. It's, how are we going to manage the welfare warfare state? And they fail to realize that their paradigm of welfare and warfare is the root cause of America's woes.
Well, maybe some of the viewers will recall that like a million years ago, in a previous century, there was a talk show after the evening news called Point Counterpoint. And there was a conservative columnist named James Kirkpatrick, and I forget who the female liberal was, and they would argue. But Saturday Night Live used to do a spoof about them almost every week. And they would have one of their actors who would be playing this conservative columnist, James Kirkpatrick, turn to his opponent and say, "Jane, you ignorant slut." And, that was the entire tone of this Saturday Night Live spoof of them. Now, this was like watching the debate last night. Hillary, you ignorant slut. Trump, I mean, it was a joke, okay? It was a joke. These are two political plundering power lusters, each from their own perspective and their views of these things, going after each other with no other purpose than to gain the presidency for their own sense of power control and to pander and to serve the special interest that they're catering to. There is no substance to them in terms of a real debate about what should America be about, what policies would be most conducive to both liberty and prosperity. All it is insults about the characters, the sleaziness, the corruption, the incompetence, the lack of stamina of each of them. And when they do get to policy, as you were just correctly pointing out, Jacob, both of them are variations on the interventionist welfare state theme. Trump wants to do what? He wants to force businesses not to leave America. He's going to banish any foreign imports that he considers to be unfairly and unjustly being manufactured, produced, and then sold in the United States. He's going to have a secret plan, or just like Nixon, a secret plan to defeat the Islamic State in the Middle East. Oh, now, what is Hillary offering? Hillary is offering the traditional grab bag of the left promises. An enumeration of what you just said. I'm going to give you relief on your college tuition, free tuition. I'm going to build the infrastructure. I'm going to see that welfare is improved. I'm going to create jobs. Hillary Clinton has never had an honest day's work. What? She was a lawyer at some point early in her career? Now, we won't get into your sleazy past, Jacob, but a lawyer? I mean, that's not earning an honest living. Okay, I mean, she's never had an honest day's work. Now, Trump may be a crony capitalist, but at least he's been in the business world. I mean, he at least has hired someone, had to meet a bottom line and meet a payroll. I mean, what the hell has she ever met? She doesn't have a payroll. She has a gravy train of tax-funded money or special interests who feed her foundation for privileges and favors when she was in power and if she now becomes the president in the Oval Office. I mean, these are farces. If we could be living on another planet of serene liberty and prosperity, and through a giant telescope being looked down at the United States and watching this, we could laugh at the satire and absurdity and craziness of it. Unfortunately, we're in it. What did Shakespeare say? All the world is a stage, and we're in it. We are, and the problem is that one of them will become president. And they will go into the White House. And they will be following their statist, collectivist, interventionist, welfare redistributive agendas. The only difference is who are the special interest groups to be served, who are to be penalized, and what controls will be added to those already enveloping the American people in their personal, social, and economic lives, and therefore making our economic and personal liberty far less in the future with stagnation and maybe even growing poverty. That is our only future in selecting among these two, and that's what was on the stage last night. Pathetic, sorry, sad, and dangerous.
Yeah,
that's my most optimistic view of this.
Yeah, your point about Trump stopping American businesses from going overseas. I mean, he starts out by saying that the Chinese and the Latin America, Mexico is stealing our jobs. Now, how does a country steal a job? I mean, stealing involves the forcible taking of something that doesn't belong to you. I mean, when the IRS takes your money to give it to Social Security recipients or Medicare recipients or foreign aid to dictators, that's stealing. When a robber comes into your house and takes what belongs to you and appropriates it to his own use or somebody else's use, that's stealing. How does a foreign country, steal an American job? I mean, really what he's saying is that there are economic opportunities that in foreign countries that American businessmen find attractive. And in large part because over here, the amount of regulations, the amount of taxation is becoming so exorbitant that American businesses are finding it in their interest to go elsewhere. And they don't get that. And so what does Trump do when they said, well, how are you going to force them to stay here? And he didn't really have a good answer to that.
No.
But I think he could have said, look, I got my wall because I'm going to build my big Berlin Wall there, at least on the southern border, and I'm going to have sharpshooters there who can shoot in both directions. So, I mean, that's the idea behind walls, that you keep people in and you keep people from coming in. And so, yeah, I think he could have said that. But the whole concept of stealing our jobs, that, you know, there's a reason people are leaving America, and many of them are giving up their citizenship, that you've got this giant welfare state way of life. You've got this warfare state way of life where they've been killing people on a daily basis for 25 years now in the Middle East. And, yeah, what was their solution to that? They both are going to stop ISIS. I mean, it's just 25 years, Richard, of killing people. When does it finally stop? Well, for both of these candidates, it never stops. It's like that title of that book that somebody wrote called Perpetual War for Perpetual Peace. I mean, that's what this is all about. Just keep killing people and killing people, which, of course, then fortifies the national security establishment. The anti-American terrorism keeps people agitated and afraid. So you've got two sides of this vice that are squeezing the American people. You've got all the taxes that are funding the welfare state. You got all the taxes that are funding the warfare state. You've got the Federal Reserve inflating the money supply to accommodate this massive, ever-growing debt. And the American people are right in the middle of this vice. And all you have is two candidates saying, let me run the vice. So as you point out, we can provide largesse to our buddies and our friends rather than their buddies and their friends. But nothing fundamental is being challenged here. From what I understand, they didn't even challenge the drug war. I fell asleep in the latter part of it, but I don't even think they talked about that.
No, I could not. I'll be honest. I could not make it through the entire debate. I made it through about 2/3 to 3/4, and then I decided to turn to Rocco and on Hulu watch a rerun of Rizzoli and Isles, which I found much more entertaining. But now, but the fact is that exactly as you brought out, how did Trump portray countries like China? They're stealing jobs. No. What is happening is that manufacturers in China, usually in partnership with American companies in a now extended international division of labor through vast global supply chains, either manufacture or assemble the component parts of goods, many of the component parts still made in the United States, and then reship them back to the U.S. and make them available to our consumers than if they were more fully produced from beginning to end in some other location other than the United States. And this means even with the transportation costs, right, all the way either flying or ship transporting across the Pacific Ocean, it is still cheaper to manufacture them, to make those goods available to American consumers. This is not stealing a job. What it is offering consumers a more attractive package. Now, what is the result of that, if I can sort of just respond to this absurd conception that Trump has? An American consumer was maybe previously buying something for $10. Now a foreign supplier, maybe a manufacturer and seller originating in China, some foreign supplier is able to offer it to the American consumer, even after all the transportation costs to get it over here, for, let's say, for example, $5. Now that consumer has now been able to buy for $5 what previously cost him $10. He not only has the product for less, but he has $5 left over in his pocket after purchasing the good. to spend on other things that previously, when he paid $10 for the, let's say, American version of it, he couldn't afford to buy. His standard of living has now gone up. He has the product for $5 and $5 more of other things he hadn't had before. Plus, by the fact of having a spare $5 left in his pocket after buying the less expensive foreign import, that raises a demand for other products. And that creates alternative employment, even for those who may lose their jobs in what is now the less competitive domestic rival of the foreign supplier. Rising standards of living, alternative job creations, and improvement in the economic circumstances of virtually all, taking the long-run view of, with all change, a period of adjustment. And Trump understands none of this. Certainly in his rhetoric, he expresses no understanding of it. He, in fact, represents the most ignorant and backward and primitive economic thinking that one would have thought that now almost 250 years ago that Adam Smith had refuted in his Wealth of Nations that came out in 1776. So Trump is in the pre-Adam Smith era of economic ignorance. When he said, again, he says, look at the world and compare our balance of trade with the world. We have a trade deficit with the world. No. What we do is we import some goods, we export others, and then we are importing capital. That's the difference of the amount that we are borrowing for goods that we have sold and in relation to what we've purchased from them. That is enhancing our productive capacity, with some of those dollars returning to the United States as direct investment by a foreign seller who's earned that dollar and chooses to invest it in the American economy, or lend it to Americans by leaving it on deposit in an American financial institution. He can't think 3 steps down the chain of economic causality. Is he competent and qualified to be president? Purely in terms of baby economics, he hasn't even crawled out of the stroller yet. How can he be considered to be intelligent enough to talk about trade deals or our economic relations with other countries when he lives in the primitive world of 18th century mercantilism?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, she isn't much better because she doesn't challenge him at the fundamental level that you're talking about. She doesn't get up there and says free trade is beneficial, free trade is good, because she doesn't believe in free trade. She believes in government-managed trade. So it's just a matter of one regulator versus another regulator. But notice that she never challenged him on the beneficial aspects of free trade. And let's talk about taxation. I mean, here Hillary's over there talking about stealing from the rich again. Now, let's keep in mind how the income tax first got enacted, that they were promising people that it would only apply to the rich, never apply to the middle class, never apply to the poor. And that's how they seduce people into supporting the 16th Amendment, is that, hey, if we're only going to steal from the rich here. And that's effectively what she was saying last night, that, hey, under her tax plan, she's going to tax only the rich. And in fact, one of the amusing aspects of the debate was when she accused Trump of causing the budget deficit because he hadn't paid his income taxes for 15 years. And he responds, well, that shows how smart I am, that I'm taking advantage of all the tax loopholes. And she got, the debate moderator and Clinton got outraged that he would suggest that he was smart because he was figuring out how to use the income tax code by not paying income taxes. But, it's just the same concept, Richard, of envy and covetousness and this ridiculous concept of income inequality and what needs to be done. And that's really what she's all about, is just taking as much money from the rich as she can to fund all her freebies. And none of it's, again, going to ever work, that you can't have a system that's based on the immoral concept of taking from somebody who has more in order to give it to somebody who has less. That what we libertarians are doing is challenging the whole paradigm itself and saying, why not leave people free to keep everything they earn? Will you have disparities of wealth? Of course. But if everybody's benefiting from this, if the lower 10% has a higher standard of living than they would under a system of income forced equality, who cares if there's income inequality? If everybody's better off, then what's wrong with that system? Well, obviously from the standpoint of both Clinton and Trump, there's a lot wrong with that because government's not heavily involved confiscating people's assets and and running their lives for them and running their economic activity.
I think that, if I can amplify these last points to talk about the ideas that they didn't refer to or elaborate, is that, the natural condition of man is poverty. Thousands of years, the human race everywhere survived on bare subsistence. There were a few who had greater than subsistence. They were the plunderers of the society, whether it be roving bands of thieves, or whether it was stationary kings and princes and lords of the manor. That was income inequality. A handful of power lusters as kings and princes and appointed nobility and aristocrats who used political power to rule over land, resources, and people. And you had no way to climb out of that. What the competitive free market of classical liberal capitalism did was to eliminate all the restrictions and controls and allow people to save, to accumulate, and however modestly, looking over those earlier times compared to our own, to put some wealth aside to invest in tools, implements, machines. Again, however primitive from our standard today, but that was the high tech of 400 or 500 years ago, 300 years ago. And with that simple savings and investment and capital formation, they were able to produce more goods than the previous labor-intensive ways. And they were able to hire those with their savings to employ during the production process and give income to others. And those people started earning enough to put some aside as well and to become more educated and skilled and qualified. And maybe, if not open a business themselves, then through the emergence of capitalist financial markets, pool their however modest savings with others to accumulate wealth through interest income. Until in the 19th century, we saw the bursting emergence of something that had never existed in human society, the middle class, not just the aristocrats and the lord of the manor on high and everyone, the serf or the slave. No, an emerging middle class. And the middle class didn't come from tearing down those who had wealth from success, but by drawing people from, quote, the lower classes out of poverty. That is what does it. Savings, investment, capital formation, wise entrepreneurship to direct production in effective and profitable ways that creates jobs and output and rising standards of living. And that is what certainly Hillary Clinton has no understanding of. That's what she calls, the failed trickle-down economics. You know what trickle-down economics is? Being at the receiving end of waiting from government handouts, the trickling down of redistributed wealth from the state. Please, please, Uncle Sam, pay for my public housing. Please, please, Uncle Sam, do I qualify for a student loan? Please, please, Uncle Sam, give me my food stamps and tell me what I'm allowed to eat with them and what not. Please, please, Uncle Sam, give me the money that enables me to live and without which I can't make it on my own because you've made me dependent. That is trickle-down economics, the state redistributive system. The market is wealth from the bottom up, raising people up, not making them puppets on the strings of the political manipulators and plunderers. And Trump is just a crony capitalist. He talks about cutting taxes and it's going to be great and beautiful with jobs and businesses. But all of this in the setting of his notions of control and power and manipulation. His is just a variation on Clinton's that has a little bit more of this rhetoric from his business experience, but it is no better than what Clinton is offering. A pox on both their houses. And again, that's in my optimistic and positive view of things.
Yeah, I think your point about this dependency, I was laughing at your little rendition of it, of the trickle-down welfare state. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it creates this mindset of dependency. There's no better example of this than Social Security recipients, that they honestly believe they would be dying in the streets without Social Security, that they would just couldn't survive. Well, this is just nonsense. You could repeal Social Security today, and most people would get along fine, especially since children would be keeping everything they earned rather than having an enormous amount withheld from their paycheck. But you see it all across the board. You even see foreign dictators acting like you said, oh, please, I could never survive with my dictatorship if I don't get my foreign aid. And I'm glad you draw this distinction between 19th century America, because a lot of Americans don't realize this, that we've had two different economic systems in America. You've got a system where everybody keeps everything they earn. There's no welfare. There's no Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. There's no drug war. There's no immigration controls. And you have this enormous amount of economic prosperity that takes the poor and elevates them into the middle class through their own efforts, where they're not dependent on the state. Now you have a system that the progressives brought into that, as you say, oh, please let me have my allotment. Yes, I'm dependent on it. I couldn't survive without it. And they're weak. I mean, we've got the strongest government in the world, but really among the most frightened, weak, dependent people in history. And then the other side of this is the 19th century rejected enormous military establishment, CIA, NSA, and yet now we have this gigantic, really is a totalitarian-like structure that they said was necessary to become like the communist totalitarian structures with secret monitoring of the citizenry and secret assassinations and regime change operations and giant interventionism all over the world. That really is destroying our country. So you've got two different systems here, and they don't seem to recognize that. They're just battling over who's gonna manage this rotten, dying system. And the press plays into this, Richard. Look what was passing for controversial questions, substantive questions from the press. The birther controversy. Like, who cares at this point who said Obama was born elsewhere? It's like, they're shuffling the decks on the Titanic. This is a country that's headed toward the iceberg, and they're over arguing about stupid issues about whether Donald Trump has released his income tax returns. Ridiculous. I mean, presidential candidates all the way up to 1913 never released their income tax returns because there was no income tax and therefore no IRS and no returns to do. So you've got the press playing in this with these silly issues when the real substantive issues of how is this country going to survive this welfare warfare state way of life? How's that going to work? And that's what they just don't get.
I know the focus on these trivial issues. For example, for a long time, I thought our president was Irish. I thought it was O''Bama. It didn't bother me that he might be Irish. What did it matter?
Why can't foreign citizens be president?
So what if he's Irish? Who cares? But then I realized that it was a different thing. But that you live and learn. But I mean, it's obviously the case that they're focusing on the most. Did he release his tax returns? Who cares? Her emails. Well, her emails are a totally different corrupt thing. But in the element of what would they represent as visions for an America looking for the next 4 years? In that sense, her corruption with her emails, whatever he made, his business dealings as a crony capitalist. Of course, at one level, that it's useful to know about the people who are asserting their claim to be president of the United States. But what is really in the long term important is what do they stand for? Do they stand for the principles of individual liberty, the right of the free person to live his life as he chooses, keeping his honestly acquired property through free association and exchange with his fellow men for mutual benefit on a free market? Or do they stand for a political paternalism and an elitist arrogance that the state must guide, direct, control, and command all that everyone does under the assertion that they know better than the rest of us how to manage our lives and will then dictate what we do, how we do, where we do, with whom, and with what language and purpose? That's the two visions, command or competition, freedom or paternalism, control or liberty. And that is the realm of discourse and debate that was not on that stage last night, because neither political party or the consensus of the media or the intellectuals of this country want it, believe in it, or even more profoundly sad, understand it.
Well, on that high note, I think we should wrap up then. Clearly what you really outlined is the libertarian vision and what we need to do to get America back on the right track. And unfortunately, with neither of these two candidates, we're looking at the right track. But you never know about the power of public opinion. And there's something to be said about the power of ideas to bring things down like Berlin Walls and big apparatuses that are immoral and that have no place in a free society. And so that's what we keep doing. We keep trying to build up that consensus in the private sector for dismantling what these people stand for. So on that note, Richard, enjoyed the show again, and look forward to talking to you next week.
Till next week, and thank you for viewing or listening.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you all next week.